see anymore. You can see all their bank accounts, the balance in their bank accounts, the last times they declared cash somewhere. You can see every time they hit a flock camera anywhere in the country. Flock is a giant national traffic monitoring system that is basically everywhere now, and they're taking photographs at every intersection all day, and it's using AI to like read license plates and put identities of people places, and it's just keeping all that data, like all of it. That's what they've got in their car right now, and we're not getting that in discovery. We're not able to confront it, and we're not able to use it as Brady evidence. We've got Fourth Amendment issues galore, obviously. I didn't realize how prevalent it was. There has never been a surveillance program in the history of the United States that was not used brutally and in a corrupt fashion. And now we have the biggest surveillance system that we've ever had.
I'm just curious to see if they've actually got this system in cars. Wow. Looking at this is terrifying. How Palantir is used in patrol cars. Palantir software, specifically the Gotham platform, is used by various law enforcement agencies in their operations, and officers in patrol cars can access the data it aggregates via their mobile data computers and automated license plate readers. Gotham integrates vast amounts of data from disparate sources, including police reports, arrest records, gang intelligence, and ALPR data. Officers in patrol cars can access this information via their mobile data computers to get a comprehensive view of a suspect's history, relationships, and movements. When an officer types in a name or license plate number, the system can quickly create a detailed profile that might include previous addresses, phone numbers, bank accounts, family relationships, and even physical descriptions like tattoos, as long as that information is available in the integrated databases. There's the key detail right there. It's as long as that information is available. This is the only way we're going to stop this, everybody, is we've got to keep them from getting our information. Don't sign up for the Real ID. Don't comply with any of this nonsense that they're trying to force us into by making life more inconvenient.
Hey everyone, there's a concept that's absolutely blowing up on Chinese social media right now. It's called the kill line. Many Chinese creators are using this concept to expand the US to Chinese audiences. I'm not here to judge it, I just want to explain how it's being described, and then hear what you think. What's interesting is that this kill line idea isn't completely made up. In the US, there's already an official term that overlaps heavily with it. ALICE, asset limited, income constrained, employed. Now in these Chinese videos, creators often explain this using video games metaphors. They break the kill line into 4 stages. Stage 1, constant bleeding, meaning you are working, you have income, but there's no real buffer. It's like a video game where your health bar is always draining. Rent, car notes, insurance, taxes, tips, everything eats away at you daily. You can't afford to get sick. You can't afford for anything to go wrong. Stage 2, critical hit. That's when something finally breaks the balance. A missed paycheck, an emergency room visit, an ambulance ride that costs thousands, or insurance denying your claim. One event is enough to punch through whatever buffer you had left and push your bills overdue. Stage 3, credit collapse. And this is where things stop being just personal and start being structural. Late payments tank your credit scores. Suddenly, you can't rent easily, you can't access better jobs, you can get affordable loans. You're forced to pay the loans with insane interest. The debt snowballs gets bigger, fast. Stage 4, systemic execution. If you lose your car or your house, court notice may not even reach you, you lose by default. More debt piles up, and your final destination is the streets. In those same Chinese videos, the argument doesn't stop at personal struggle. They go one step further, and this is the core logic behind the kill line. The claim is that this isn't an accident, it's structural. According to this explanation, high living costs, aggressive financial systems, and a very unforgiving legal framework work together to sort people out, not slowly but efficiently. The idea is that in a highly financialized economy like the US, profits come more from assets than from everyday labor. When that happens, wealth concentrates at the top, and pressure gets pushed downward. And when a society can't support a dignified life for everyone, the system creates a threshold. Rent, healthcare, education, and debt becomes a filter. People who can keep up and really repaired or reintegrated, they are priced out and pushed to the margins. Again, I'm not saying this is the truth. This is how Chinese creators are explaining it to their own audience. And I want to know, does this interpretation resonate with you? What does it missing something important?
Sounds to me like he's hitting the nail right on the head. Clearly, this entire system was designed to function the way it's functioning. And when you take that into account, even though things look chaotic, it is kind of running like a well-oiled machine. It's just pathetic that this is the machine they built. But there are multiple revelations that will come to light in today's video. Things that we all suspected to be true, but today we get confirmation. Just a few more little pieces to the puzzle showing how they plan to pull this off to get us all moved into these smart cities like rats in a cage, keep us from owning anything, and soak up all the assets for themselves. Hey, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you haven't already, and don't forget to drop your theories and your comments in the comments section down below.
Imagine you own a small building in New York City and you want to sell it to your son or your aunt or your neighbor, and someone has the right of first refusal over whether you're able to do that. Well, that's kind of what the new COPA proposal is. COPA, if you don't know, is a bill that's in the city council. It has a veto-proof majority if it is brought to a vote, but they're rejiggering the arrangement and they have not actually put forward a final proposal. That used to be 3 units above, now it's 5 units and above. It used to have certain restrictions for owner occupancy. Now it includes things like issues with violations, financial hardship, things like that in these buildings. But at the end of the day, the root issue remains. People do not want buildings sold to LLCs, large corporations that are going to take these buildings and turn them into investment portfolios. And on the other side, people want to be able to buy and sell their building without city intervention, without the city saying that they're not able to buy and sell to who they'd like to at the price and terms that they'd like them to. There are a few concerns we have about the latest iteration. Number one, you have a year, you have 1 full year where the city needs to be involved with whether you can accept an offer or not accept an offer. And these nonprofit bidders also have right of first refusal. So if you say you're not interested in their offer, they still have time to be a bidder of last resort, and they can decide who you end up selling the building to. And also keep in mind that you don't know who is on the list that HPD is approving, right? There are for-profit people that can now partner with HPD to buy these buildings. But how does a for-profit person get on this list? There could definitely be a few things that go wrong with that. We'll have to see. And then the nonprofit people, I mean, it's hard to say. We don't really know who these nonprofit buyers are. So the idea of it could be good, and there are parts of it that could be salvaged. But if you're an individual homeowner, like a lot of the people we deal with now that own small buildings, they don't really want the city involved with telling them who they can sell to and at what price and terms.
New York City's COPA law that everyone's about, let me tell you how it works. Step 1, you have to decide that you're going to sell your building. Hold on, you can't list it publicly yet. Step 2, you notify nonprofits to see if they want to buy it. They then have a 30-day window to tell you if they're interested or not. If you don't, it's a $30,000 fine. But here's the bad news. If they are interested, they have up to 120 days to give you an offer. Now, if you don't want to accept that offer, that's when you can put it on the open market. If you put it on the open market and you get an offer that you absolutely love, you then have to offer it back to the city at that same price, causing tremendous delays in the closing process, which inevitably leads to dead deals. If you look at a crashing industry, well, this is the perfect way to do it.
How many times have we heard of someone who struggled and struggled trying to just keep that mortgage paid month by month, and maybe they're 2 or 3, 4 months behind on their mortgage, but they've been maintaining that lapse in mortgage payments for half a year. This whole time they're thinking, you know, I'll get some unexpected windfall of cash or a new business opportunity, something will come through and I'll be able to make up this difference. You won't be able to afford to have hope anymore, to try to work and figure out what to do if you get behind on your mortgage payment. It's going to take half a year to a year or more to be able to get permission to sell your own property. That's if someone even wants to buy it. If you're already several months behind on your mortgage and you're selling it to get out from under it because you don't want it to go back to the bank and destroy what's left of your credit, New York just essentially took that option off the table for its residents. If you're already 2 or 3 months behind on your mortgage and you were thinking about doing this, you're screwed. That property is going to go back to the bank. And then one of these investment companies or BlackRock or the government is going to be able to snatch it up for pennies on the dollar. This is how they're going to slowly take everyone's home. And they'll just increase property taxes and stuff until nobody can afford to own a home anymore. But I tell you what, the government's going to keep playing these games with people until the wrong guy gets fed up with it. I know things appear to be playing out in their favor. wholeheartedly. But not everybody's just going to roll over and take this. The government can't come in and tell you who you can and cannot sell your property to and how long you have to wait to be able to sell it. Those are decisions that are made by the property owner. How obvious can you be that you're just trying to steal people's property?
And now where are we going?
Now we're going to Sweet Angel Childcare.
Once again, I try to find a spot for my son Joey, and they would not open the doors.
In fiscal year 2025, this facility, which shows its license for 74 kids, was paid $1.26 million. And there are no kids, and all the facilities are the same way. You work here?
I was, yeah. What's happened?
Where are the kids? They got paid $1.26 million in fiscal year 2025. It says they have a capacity for 74 children.
When?
Where are the kids? Right here.
So this is a citizen journalist named Nick Shirley.
Fiscal year 2025, it says they have a capacity for 74 children.
When?
Where are the kids? Right here.
So this is a citizen journalist named Nick Shirley, and he went to multiple registered Somali-run daycares in Minneapolis that get millions of dollars in government money, and he found them all locked and empty. How in the world is this not a national news story? So first we have Ilhan Omar pushing federal programs through Congress that funneled hundreds of millions of dollars into Somali-run food charities that turned out to be a massive fraud scheme. Money was being sent to freaking Hezbollah, but I guess we're gonna ignore all of that. Now we have dozens of Somali-run daycare centers that get millions in taxpayer dollars and they're empty? Anybody with a news van wanna follow up on this? ABC? CNN? Anyone? The American people are being defrauded and stolen from in real time in broad daylight, and nobody's allowed to say anything about it because if you criticize a non-white migrant for blatant theft, you're a racist. Wake up. You are being lied to.
Who's getting the money, and where are they getting the money from?
So we have a thing called CCAP. It's a blend of federal and state money. The bottom line is it's taxpayer money, so it's state money and it's federal money. And the problem is the people of the state of Minnesota are the ones writing the checks. This is kind of the maddening thing is you have daycare, so you have adult daycare, and then you have child care, and then you have health care. And a lot of these same names keep coming up on all of these different types of businesses. And then of course we have the transportation, and a lot of those same names appear, a lot of the same addresses. There's one building that has 14 Somali healthcare companies at the same address. There's another building in St. Paul that has 22 Somali healthcare businesses at the same address.
And the government knows about this?
The government knows, they're writing the checks. Yeah, the Democrats over there just writing the checks. What has happened is that the Somali community is a very closed community. They will not speak to anyone outside the community and talk about what's going on within the community. They vote as a block. And so when you're a politician, you're saying, look, I've got 100,000 people in Minnesota that if I do something for the community, they're going to vote for me. And that's what it's all about, is getting the votes. And then the people here in Minnesota, you hear this term, Minnesota nice. I'm so sick of that term. The people here are so afraid of being called a racist or an Islamophobe, and they're afraid of their own shadow. And I don't understand. This is our future generations are going to have to pay for all this fraud, and they just want to bury their heads in the sand and go on and just not worry about it. Tim Walz saying there's organized crime in Minnesota. What did he do about it? Nothing. You got organized crime? What are you doing? This is the Minnesota law, which mandates that anyone who knows of fraud and is a state employee must report that fraud. It's Minnesota Statute 3.971, Subdivision 9. Not only that, but Walz is also guilty of misconduct of a public employee. When I look at the world as a whole and I look at fraud, the Twin Cities is ground zero. The fraud is worse here than anywhere else ever in history, anywhere.
We're gonna go confront these people. We're going to go to these daycare centers. We're going to see what's actually happening.
There's not going to be any future generations paying none of this back because there's not going to be any future generations. They'll wipe the population out long before anyone has to pay the repercussions of this. They're still in our country, right out from underneath our feet. I'm seeing stories about this all over the internet, and no one's doing a thing about it except for YouTubers and TikTokers. What difference does it make that we're not allowing anyone over our border right now? All the people who are going to destroy our system are already here, and they're all in bed with the government. They're doing the government's dirty work. They're getting millions and millions of dollars in government handouts. They threaten us with jail time if we don't pay our taxes, and then they're handing over our taxes to people who are just robbing the system. And they're doing this for votes? Whatever happened to earning votes of citizens by doing them right? Whatever happened to being a decent human being and banking on that getting you votes? I don't see why anyone's paying taxes anymore. At this point, there's been so much evidence of fraud and corruption. What can they honestly tell us they even need our tax dollars for? If they needed our tax dollars so bad that they're willing to jail us over not paying them, how come they don't need them bad enough to go investigate some of this stuff? How come they don't need them bad enough to turn off the obvious drain on the system?
Play the devil's advocate that you hear every time we take a bad step towards more digital surveillance. Well, I don't have anything to hide. I don't really care. I don't have anything to hide. Well, why is that, a kindergarten answer?
Well, I would argue because a lot of these companies that are engaged in these mass surveillance, or the contractors really that are engaged in mass surveillance, don't ultimately have just watching what you're doing as being enough for them. They're ultimately interested in things like predictive analytics and predictive policing. So based on your behavior now and your behavior in the past, they want to use artificial intelligence to determine what you may do in the future. And in the case of predictive policing, that would be, well, we've determined that you may commit a crime in the future, and so we're going to, send you to a court-ordered physician, or, issue house arrest to stop crime before it happens, essentially.
Minority
is where a lot of these companies, and unfortunately it is that, and there's a lot of companies that have made massive inroads in that type of technology, even though it's been hugely discredited. There's several companies. I think the most notorious at this point was called Predpol. They've since rebranded, but they were less accurate than a coin toss, and people were being deprived of their liberty because of an algorithm that was hugely inaccurate. And ultimately, if you look in the UK, for example, some of these algorithms for facial recognition have been rolled out, even though they've been shown over there too to be hugely inaccurate. And there's no interest in changing vendors, even when this inaccuracy is demonstrated. So to me, that says that their goal is to have us induce and be obedience by the fact that you're being watched all the time, and anything you may do could be used against you, even if you're not doing anything wrong now. An algorithm could determine that certain, errant behaviors warrant you being added to a list of some type. And actually, Larry Ellison of Oracle, who is one of the main funders of Tony Blair's institute, that's one of the biggest pushers for digital ID in the UK, said this at an Oracle shareholder meeting, that, we're recording and surveilling everything, and citizens will be on their best behavior because they have to, essentially, and paraphrasing.
The fact that Donald Trump is listening to that guy is terrifying to me. I mean, he has put some people around him on this tech board that are not friends of freedom and liberty. They're just not. Larry Ellison is leading that pack.
Yeah, a lot of them are I would argue overtly and also covertly globalist. You have people, in that network you just mentioned, serving, for example, on the steering committee of the Bilderberg Group, which is, a well-known closed-door meeting, globalist conflab. And unfortunately, I think some of them anyway, have been able to characterize their policies as libertarian, for example, even though some of those same oligarchs are on record saying that the free market is for losers. If you want to get rich, build a monopoly. And build monopolies, they have, unfortunately. But I think, again, this is what I was saying earlier about the World Economic Forum, there's an effort to sell this, since they couldn't sell it from the left. The goal now is to try and sell it somehow from the right, and to try and frame it under metrics and dialectics that'll be more appealing to the group that was most against these policies just a few years ago. And unfortunately, with AI and all of that, it could happen if people aren't vigilant.
She's saying that their goal is to tell people that you should be on your best behavior because we're going to be constantly watching you. But if their predictive models are no better than a coin flip, then in my eyes, it's telling me the exact opposite. It's telling me that they're telling all of society, might as well do what you want because you're going to be pinned with something that you aren't going to do anyway. Enjoy your freedoms while you still have them. They're just going to use this to take out the people who disagree with them, who aren't getting with the program, and even people who are getting with the program are going to be caught up in this nonsense. And what's so pathetic about all of this is we had the illusion of choice. So many people thought if we just get the right guy in office, all of this will change. All of this will go away. We'll all be saved. And you see what would have happened if we would have got Tim Walz in there. Look at what he's doing in his home state. Look at all the free tax dollars he's given over to the Somalis that he's getting a cut of. So it was either vote for these people and get bled dry, or vote for these people and lose every freedom you ever thought you had. And what's more frustrating than any of this is I can't even tell you what I really think we ought to be doing right now to fix this, or I won't be able to post a video tomorrow.
So supposedly there's this weird thing going on right now where women are being kidnapped from coffee shops, Walmarts, mall parking lots. I've been watching this since yesterday. They said that, give you an example what happened. A woman was in a coffee shop. She got a coffee and she noticed this guy was like following her around and staring at her intently. She made her way out of the store. He followed her to her car. She got in her car, kept the windows up, locked the doors real quick, started the car, and the guy starts banging on her window. And he's like, hey, you got a flat tire. She ignored him and she's like, no. My dad says my tires are fine. Thank you. She started to back up the car, and the guy got behind her car, and she couldn't go forward because the building was in the front. She could only go backwards, and the guy was blocking her, started yelling at her, no, you can't drive, you got a flat tire. And the woman got frustrated. I guess she slammed on the gas, and then the guy got nervous because he didn't want to get hit, and he jumped out of the way, and the lady was able to pull out of the parking spot and then burn off out of the parking lot and take off and go home. So if you have a wife or a girlfriend or a daughter, make sure you let them know. If someone follows you out to your car in the parking lot, lock your doors, ignore them no matter what they say, and get the hell out of there. If they say you got a flat tire, if they say your license plate fell off, if they say you got a tail light out, whatever, get in your car and get the hell out of there. Don't listen to nobody because you can't trust anybody anymore.
It's pathetic, but this is completely true. You can't trust anyone anymore. It seems like there's more people out there trying to cause harm now than there are people trying to do good. And of course, that's not the case. I can't believe that. I can't believe that the majority of people out there don't want to do good. But you hear about the obvious trafficking issues and kidnapping and stuff that's going on and how it's apparently all being funded by the federal government. And then you wonder why this stuff is so prevalent. It's because they're not trying to catch these people. They're all in on it. The people who should be going after these criminals are themselves criminals. But this is just one that I thought people needed to be aware of. There are too many people out there that think we're still living in the 1990s. They think that if some stranger comes up and starts telling you, hey, you forgot to close your gas cap, or hey, you got a low tire. There are too many people out there that are just trusting, that just assume that a stranger is trying to do them some good. But just think about all the times someone's been brutally attacked right out on the street and there were 30 or 40 eyewitnesses and nobody did a thing. Nobody cares to help anyone anymore. No one's going to go out of their way, take time out of their day to come make sure that you don't get 10 miles down the road and your tire blow out because it's low. They're going to get in their car and go on about their day. I live in a small town where people still interact in this way, where people are just kind for no reason. You certainly can't trust this type of behavior in the cities, but this stuff is starting to infect every small town in America now. It's just not worth the risk. You'd be better off driving down the road and hoping that your tire doesn't blow out. But unfortunately, you just can't trust that people are genuinely trying to be kind anymore. You'd be better off risking it, and if you blow out a tire, try to limp home on a rim.
So, one of my friends that I grew up with, I found out the other day, passed away in a car crash. And I read through how she passed away, and it made me so sad, because I know if I was in that car that she would still be alive. And because of that, I want to tell you what you can do to stay alive if you have a runaway vehicle. If your accelerator on your car sticks and you got a sticky gas pedal, don't try and steer. Your engine is running away. Your engine is stuck accelerating for some reason. Your transmission is not. If you have a runaway car, to save your life, grab your shifter and put your shifter into neutral. Your transmission will be in neutral. No torque from the engine will go into your transmission. Your engine will just be up there revving along, doing its own thing, and it will not be driving your wheels. Your vehicle will begin to slow down. You can push your brakes, and you can pull over and shut the car off. Please do not try to drive out a runaway accelerating vehicle. You will die. Her death is very tragic, and I just wanted to put this out there that maybe, hopefully, someone will see this and will learn, how to save their life. All it takes, 2 seconds. Grab that shifter, put it in neutral. That's it. Neutral. It's no longer driving. The car will begin to slow down. Slam on that emergency brake, slam on your brakes after you've done that, and you will be okay.
Coming across this story this morning, it got me thinking about something. Isn't there a famous 911 call of basically this exact scenario where there was 3 or 4 people trapped in a car that was just flying out of control, and the driver actually called for help and no one told him to do this? I feel like this is one of those situations where after the fact, if you're able to survive, you would think back and think, well, duh, I should have just put it in neutral. If you're not aware of this stuff, if you don't think these things through before you find yourself in that situation, it could be game over. This is one of those common sense solutions that you're just not going to think of whenever you're in a panic. So I just thought this would be a really good clip to add, because this is something, honestly, that I've never thought about, but it makes perfect sense. But guys and gals, I'm going to go ahead and end the video right there. Y'all
The space age didn't begin with science, it began when a founder of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory summoned a demon. This is the dark truth about the age of disclosure and the upcoming Disclosure Day film. We aren't preparing for contact with aliens, we're walking into a spiritual trap set by the very entities we were warned not to trust. You won't want to miss this one. On a cold night in January of 1946, a 31-year-old rocket scientist named Jack Parsons stood inside of a circle drawn in the sand of the Mojave Desert in California. Standing just outside the circle, holding a notebook and a pen, was his assistant, a science fiction writer named L. Ron Hubbard. Jack Parsons was one of the founders of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, or JPL. He was a brilliant chemist who practically invented the solid rocket fuel that would eventually take humanity to the moon. But on this night, Jack was not doing science. He was dressed in black robes, holding a sword, and chanting in an ancient language called Enochian. Jack believed that while science could take man to the stars, only magic could bring the stars to man. So for weeks, he and Hubbard had been performing a ritual known as the Babylon Working. Their goal was incredibly specific and incredibly dangerous. They wanted to rip a hole in the fabric of reality, a portal, and invite a celestial being to cross over into our world. As Jack reached the climax of the ritual, the air in the desert suddenly grew heavy. The wind died down instantly, and the temperature dropped. And then there was a sudden sound. Not a boom, but a tearing sound, like a zipper opening in the sky. Jack dropped his sword, looked at Hubbard, and he smiled. And he would later write in his diary that he had succeeded. He had opened the door. Jack went back to his lab, thinking he had ushered in a new age of enlightenment. He thought he was in control. But what Jack did not realize was that when you open a door to the unknown, you don't get to choose what walks through it. And something did walk through. Less than 18 months later, the world would change forever. On June 24th, 1947, a pilot named Kenneth Arnold was flying over Mount Rainier in Washington state when he saw 9 shiny metallic objects weaving through the sky at speeds that were physically impossible for any aircraft on Earth. He called them flying saucers. 2 weeks after that, in early July of 1947, a rancher outside of Roswell, New Mexico, stumbled upon a debris field that stretched for 3/4 of a mile. The rancher found metal that felt like water in his hands, but couldn't be cut or burned or broken. And according to military intelligence officers who arrived on the scene later, there wasn't just metal in the desert. There were biologics. Bodies, small gray humanoid forms that were clearly not human. The US Army Air Force immediately put out a press release saying they had captured a flying disc. But then, just hours after, they retracted it and said it was simply a weather balloon. To the public, this looked like the government was hiding the existence of visitors from another planet. It looked like the beginning of the UFO era. But inside the Pentagon, a small group of high-ranking officials began to notice a terrifying pattern that had nothing to do with outer space. They noticed that the great flying saucer wave of 1947 didn't exactly start when we invented the atomic bomb, and it did not start when we invented radar. It started months after Jack Parsons went into the desert and performed a ritual to summon non-human entities. And the coincidences did not stop there. In June of 1952, Jack Parsons died in a massive explosion in his home laboratory. He was blown to pieces, and less than 30 days after the sorcerer scientist died, a fleet of UFOs appeared over Washington, D.C. They swarmed the Capitol building and the White House, buzzing restricted airspace. The military scrambled jets to intercept them, but the objects just vanished and reappeared on radar instantly. It was clearly a show of force. By 1954, the US government was desperate for answers.
See why I hate this game? After receiving player reports, automated review of your comms. What the heck? People who play this game are so fucking soft. Fucking little weenies reporting. Fuck them. Oh no, not yet. I'm baking a pizza, so I'll start the game once I'm done.
They weren't just looking at radar blips anymore. They were looking for a way to communicate. And that is when they found a housewife in Maine named Frances Swan. Frances claimed she was in contact with the entities piloting these ships and said that they were speaking to her. Well, the Navy intelligence officers who interviewed her were skeptical. They assumed she was using a radio, or maybe she was a Russian spy. They asked her to show them how she received these messages, and Frances didn't pull out a radio. She didn't use a telegraph, but instead, she sat down at a table and went into a deep trance. She then used a technique called automatic writing. This is where she would let her hand move across the paper without ever looking at it, and she was clearly guided by some unseen force. And the officers watched in shock as she wrote down coordinates and various technical details about the ships, information which she could not have ever possibly known. Now, to these secular military men in the room, they were baffled. They dismissed the method as crazy occult nonsense, but accepted it because the data was accurate. I mean, they figured, hey, if it works, it works. And in fact, one Navy commander was so impressed that he actually tried the technique himself. He sat down, cleared his mind, and invited these beings to come in and make contact. And it worked. He was successful. Moments later, a UFO appeared outside the window of the building they were in. Now, for most of the government, this was a breakthrough. It was proof that we could talk to the visitors. but for a secret faction of officers inside the Pentagon, later known as the Collins Elite, this was the moment they realized humanity was in grave danger. The Collins Elite looked at the data. They looked at Jack Parsons opening the door of the ritual, and they looked at aliens communicating through mediums and Ouija boards, methods that have been used for thousands of years to contact spirits, not astronauts. They realized the government wasn't dealing with extraterrestrials from Mars or Zeta Reticuli. They were dealing with something much older, something that had been here the whole time, waiting for an invitation. However, the Collins Elite were ignored. The machine of the military-industrial complex was too hungry for the technology. They wanted anti-gravity drives. They wanted weaponry. And so, the cover-up began, not to hide the truth about aliens, but the nature of the bargain the government was making. Fast forward 80 years to the present day, and it's 2025, and secrecy is finally breaking. The documentary The Age of Disclosure is sending shockwaves through the world. The filmmaker Dan Farah managed to get 34 high-level government insiders to go on camera. I mean, we're talking about former intelligence directors like James Clapper, retired Navy admirals, and even Senator Marco Rubio. And folks, they all said the same thing. We are not alone. Whistleblower David Grush, who's a former high-ranking intelligence officer, tells the world that the US has an entire stockpile of crashed craft, and he explains that they have intact and partially intact vehicles, as well as bodies or dead pilots. Another insider by the name of Jay Stratton, who ran the US government's UAP task force, looks into the camera and says plainly that he has seen these non-human beings with his own eyes. The world is electrified. The truth is finally out. But what's even more interesting is when Hollywood steps in to seal the deal. Coming out in June is Steven Spielberg's massive blockbuster release called Disclosure Day, which basically depicts a world where humanity finally learns the truth. It shows Emily Blunt as a news reporter getting possessed by an alien signal on live TV, and it shows Josh O'Connor as a whistleblower fighting to get the truth out. I'm sure many of you are well aware of the ties Hollywood has to the occult, and if any of you are even semi-educated on how the occult communicate, it's all through symbolism, to put it plainly. So when you see marketing material like this, you realize out of the thousands or tens of thousands different designs and marketing material you can do, it's very interesting that you would choose this sort of imagery, which obviously depicts one thing. I don't know about you guys, but they are blatantly putting it out in the open that they know something is coming, that there's going to be a disclosure day at some point, but when, we don't know. I feel like with the timing of all these things, Three Eye Atlas, the Age of Disclosure film, this film coming out, this isn't just by happenstance. This is very well orchestrated and planned out. But I also want to state that this is just my personal opinion based on my beliefs and what I know and what I've studied. However, I'm not alone, because researchers like Timothy Alberino and L.A. Marzulli are watching this unfold with horror. They know that what the Collins Elite knew back in the 50s. They point out the one thing that everybody is ignoring. If these are simply biological creatures from another star system, why do they defy the laws of physics? How can they pass through solid walls? Why do they appear to people and paralyze them and feed off their fear? And then there's the whole adrenochrome thing, which is horrifying, and I'm not going to get into that in this video. But strangest of all, why do they flee when people invoke the name of Jesus Christ? Is it possible that what we're dealing with here is already foretold in the book of Genesis chapter 6? They argue that these biologics that David Grush saw are the Nephilim, the hybrid offspring of fallen angels. The technology that the government is so desperate to reverse engineer is the forbidden knowledge that the Watchers gave to mankind in the days of Noah. The Collins Elite tried to warn the Pentagon by studying this technology. They were engaging in a spiritual transaction. They believed that these entities were demonic deceivers masquerading as space brothers to lead humanity away from God. And now, in 2026, the trap is finally springing. The disclosure that the world is cheering for is not the truth. It is the strong delusion spoken of in 2 Thessalonians. It is the final act of a ritual that Jack Parsons started in the desert 80 years ago. He opened the door, and the government spent decades studying the things that came through. And now, they're about to invite the rest of them in. The world thinks it's about to meet aliens, but when the sky opens up, it won't be Martians coming down to save us. It will be the old gods, the fallen ones, coming back to reclaim their kingdom. In late 1991, an Anglican priest and UFO researcher named Ray Boche traveled to Lincoln, Nebraska for a meeting that he was told never happened. He was meeting with two scientists who worked for the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency, or DIA. These were men with the highest security clearances imaginable. These are men who spent their days analyzing classified data from satellite intercepts and military sensors. But when they sat down across from Ray, they weren't acting like hardened intelligence officers. They were shaking. They were terrified. They handed Ray a stack of documents and told him a story that seemed impossible. They explained to him that inside the Pentagon, a secret program had been established to communicate with what the government called non-human entities, or NHEs. The scientist explained that the government had successfully established contact and were receiving messages. They were receiving technical diagrams. Now, on the surface, it just looked like a diplomatic exchange with an advanced extraterrestrial civilization. However, scientists told Ray that there was a problem. They said that these entities were liars. The entities would show the government analysts images of the future, terrible cataclysms, wars, environmental collapse, and then promised that they had the technology to save humanity. They presented themselves as these benevolent space brothers here to guide us into a new age. But the two scientists had noticed a disturbing pattern. The more they interacted with these things, the more their own personal lives began to fall apart. They described poltergeist activity following them home from the lab. They spoke of shadows standing at the foot of their beds, or their families falling ill, of a dark, oppressive atmosphere that had nothing to do with science and everything to do with spiritual warfare. They told Ray Boche that they had come to a horrifying conclusion. The US government weren't talking to aliens. They were talking to fallen angels, and the government was unknowingly entering into a Faustian bargain, trading human access for forbidden technology. Now, this meeting in '91 was the first crack in the dam, revealing a silent civil war that has been raging inside the American intelligence community for decades. While the public was being fed movies about E.T. and Close Encounters, a faction known as the Collins Elite was desperately trying to shut down these programs. They weren't trying to hide the truth from the public, they were just trying to save the souls of the people involved. But the Collins Elite failed. The lure of the technology was too strong. You see, the reason the government couldn't stop engaging with these entities is because of what we call the arms race. History shows us that while the US was recovering craft, so were the Russians and the Chinese. Now, the logic in the Pentagon was that if these entities are demons, so be it. We cannot let our enemies harness their power before we do. And in fact, not to side rail off too much, but this is the exact same mentality with creating a super intelligent AI. We can see that in the highest echelons in the government. Nothing changes. It's the same mentality, the greed for ultimate power before anybody else gets it. Well, in 2007, the Pentagon quietly launched the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, or ATIP. They then began studying high strangeness locations like Skinwalker Ranch in Utah. And just like the DIA scientist warned in '91, the phenomenon didn't stay at the ranch. Shocker! Intelligence officers, tough, secular men, would visit, they'd see lights in the sky, maybe dig into the ground, and then they would go home to Virginia or Maryland or wherever, and suddenly their wives would see wolf-like creatures in the backyard. I'm not making this up. Their children would wake up screaming because of orbs floating through the walls, and it became known as the hitchhiker effect. I'm sure many of you watching this have probably heard of this. This was proof that this wasn't just biology and nuts and bolts hardware. This was a spiritual infection. Which brings us to the precipice we are standing on right now. The narrative being pushed right now by the documentary The Age of Disclosure and Steven Spielberg's film coming out is all designed to prepare you for one specific conclusion. That this event that's going to be coming is a unification event. That we're a part of a larger cosmic family. And many ask the question, well, why would God make such a vast universe yet save it for only us? Which is why I believe, and several others, that this is actually a Trojan horse. What I believe we're seeing right now is a part of the soft disclosure phase. It is all conditioning, from the whistleblowing to the declassified videos, the Senate hearings. I mean, there's just so much. And remember, if you're watching this thinking, well, what's the purpose of all of this? Well, when this happens and the entities finally show themselves to the world, they will not look like monsters or horrible aliens. They will look like the Shining Ones. And they will claim that they seeded life on the earth, and that they genetically engineered us thousands of years ago, that they are our creators and have returned to save us from ourselves. And just like the Bible talks about a false second coming, they will have the miracles and signs and wonders to prove it. They will heal the sick, they will stop the wars, they will offer us energy that costs nothing. But the price of admission to this new galactic society will be the abandonment of the old superstition, that every religion ever created was wrong and we just had things misinterpreted, that Buddha, Muhammad, Christ was all one of them, an advanced teacher misunderstood by primitive man. Even the Collins elite warn that these entities are extremely deceptive by nature. They can manipulate matter and human consciousness, and if the world accepts their story, we aren't just accepting new technology here, we are accepting an entirely new religion. The age of disclosure isn't about the government finally telling the truth, it is about the government finally surrendering to the lie. They're not here to save us, they're here to harvest us. If the ritual in the desert in 1946 was the opening, and the decades that followed were the silent infiltration, then what's happening right now is the final stage. It is called the acclimatization. For 80 years, the strategy of the entities and their human collaborators within the military-industrial complex was absolute secrecy. They denied everything. But starting in 2017 and accelerating rapidly through 2023, the script flipped. Suddenly, the Pentagon wasn't just admitting that UFO videos were real, they were establishing official offices like the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or AARO. We watched as former high-ranking officer named David Grush sat before Congress under oath and told the world that the US government possesses intact and partially intact vehicles of non-human origin. Now, to a lot of the secular world, it appears like the government is losing control of the secret, and it looks like a victory for truth. But I don't believe that's the case. I think this is the execution of the plan. Remember that humanity has to be fully psychologically primed to accept these beings, not as invaders, but as saviors. And the most powerful tool for that conditioning isn't a dry government briefing, it's a story. To anyone familiar with the research of the Collins elite or the Bible, this looks like something else entirely. It looks like channeling, demonic possession. And the film, no shock or surprise, is filled with this imagery. We see flashes of red cardinals, birds behaving strangely, acting as harbingers or spies for the entities, suggesting that nature itself is under their control. Or, to reverse the Garden of Eden situation, that now, because they're coming back and they're our saviors, well, we can connect with animals again as it's once been. Oh, they are the Christ, they are the coming, they're here to set everything anew. This is all a part of the grand deception. And for anybody watching this still on the fence, why is it that all, not just some or one or two, but all the people who have dealt in close contact with these entities all say the same thing? They are liars, they're manipulators, they want to turn mankind away from the truth. The thing is, Martians don't flee from the name of Jesus. Demons do. The age of disclosure, folks, is coming and the world is ready to believe. The real question is, when it happens, are you really going to know what you're looking at? And because you guys made it this far, I want you to leave a comment down below, Disclosure Day. So that way I know who made it to the end and who didn't. And if you guys enjoy videos like this where we deep dive into strange cases of the mysterious and supernatural, what are you waiting for? Smack that like and subscribe button right now for more content just like this. As always, never forget, I love you all, keep an open mind, and I'll see you all in the very next video.
Just because an animal is declared extinct doesn't mean it couldn't still be out there. I know firsthand. For years, I traveled the world searching for previously thought extinct species, and my team and I have found 8 animals the world thought were lost forever. So in this video, I'm going to give you 7 more extinct species that I believe are still out there. And maybe by sharing this information, someone, somewhere, watching this might be able to find them. Starting with our first species, which, if rediscovered, would be the largest gecko on the face of the earth. Number 1, Delcourt sticky-toed gecko, last seen in 1870 and lost for 154 years. In 1986, in the basement of the Marseille Museum of Natural History, a primitive specimen of large gecko was found stuffed, unlabeled, and lacking any record of its collection date or its point of origin. Judging from the specimen, it must have been there for over a century. Once examination of this specimen was performed, it was found to be a species unknown to science. This specimen consisted of a single skin and a partial skeleton. But get this, the skin was stuffed and mounted on a wooden plank, and when mounted, it measured 2.5 feet long. This meant this unique specimen of gecko was 54% larger than the largest known extant species of gecko on the planet. Closer examination of the specimen showed that this gecko was similar to the brown forest geckos, Hypolodactylus species of New Zealand. This puzzling specimen was in fact the lost Kawikiwau, a giant and mysterious forest lizard of Maori oral tradition. Described by the Maoris as being about 2 feet long and as thick as a man's wrist, it is the largest of all known gecko species. Gigarcanum delcourti, the scientific name, was likely extinct or extremely rare by the time of colonization of New Caledonia in the mid-19th century, due to the absence of any other records of the species. So all of a sudden, with this museum specimen in the bag and this revelation, in April 1990, several sightings of a large gecko were reported in New Zealand newspapers, but it seemed as though these reports were the end of the excitement for the Delcourt sticky-toed gecko, until recently. Frank Fast and his partner Philippe de Fessol believe they know the exact hiding place of the extant Delcourt sticky-toed gecko, down to the exact tree. That's right, they believe that there is one specific tree in the middle of Maori country in remote New Zealand that under the bark is hiding the world's largest extinct giant gecko. According to Frank, this species is found to occur in the bark of a handful of different tree species. 2 of them, Podocarpus totara and Agathis australis, excuse me, I don't know my trees that well, are trees that the animal would prefer. It's semi-arboreal and will be found under the bark of these trees deep in Maori country where no other herpetologist has ever looked. The same kind of area the last 2 specimens of gecko were discovered in New Zealand in 1981 and 1984. Really not that long ago. A gecko the size of a small dog that could be living in New Zealand. Given the history of these 2 experts' discoveries of other giant geckos like the New Caledonian, I'm going to give this one a 9 out of 10 chance of still being out there. Next up, we'll look at a missing dinosaur fish whose relatives have been mistaken for the Loch Ness Monster himself. Sturgeon are the modern-day equivalents of dinosaurs, making this mini sturgeon one of our last links to the dinosaur age. Siridara shovel-nosed sturgeon was last seen in the 1960s and has been lost for more than 60 years. The Siridaria shovel-nosed sturgeon is endemic to the Siridaria River and was once found in Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan. This prehistoric-looking fish is among the smallest species in the world, growing only to about 1 foot long compared to its gigantic 20-foot-long cousins that we get right here in North America. It was once found in the Aral Sea, but according to NASA, the Aral Sea shrunk by more than 60% between 1973 and the early 2000s. Like many sturgeon, this species of fish is fully migratory between fresh and salt water. However, the population was cut off from the Aral Sea, where it presumably fed. Back when the Soviet Union was at its highest power, they performed huge water extraction for crop irrigation from the Siridaria River, and the Aral Sea leading to the Aral Sea drying up to about 1/5 of its former size. So this meant that major habitat loss, damming, and habitat fragmentation are incredibly common in the range, and when you couple that with polluted waterways, these are likely all contributing factors to the demise of this beautiful little sturgeon. So why do I believe it could still be out there? It's likely incredibly rare, but researchers and experts on the subject are hopeful the species remains just in low numbers. Back in 2016 and twice in 2018, local fishermen reported to researchers that they caught a Cyrrhidaria shovel-nosed sturgeon. These fish require a moving river for their life history, and I believe the ecosystem remains intact enough to be able to support a small but viable population of these sturgeon if the right kind of surveying and trapping were to take place. And in order to do that trapping, you would have to be able to identify good pieces of habitat that weren't fragmented, that supported the fish's natural history. Then you could go into that region and put out large seine nets to seine for fish. You could put out little box traps, and you could lean into the natural history of the fish's life cycle, like we've done with sturgeon populations around the world, to try and pinpoint a location of this fish. I believe that just like the white sturgeon that's been trapped by dozens of dams along the Columbia River that are stuck in places like the Dalles, Oregon, this sturgeon is likely to still be there. So I'm going to give this a 7 out of 10 chance of still being extant. Next up, a beautiful red primate with a coat unlike anything else in the world. Miss Waldron's colobus monkey, last seen in 1978 in the Ivory Coast and lost for over 45 years, this animal still sits on the critically endangered list. Miss Waldron's red colobus is dangerously close to becoming the first primate to be declared extinct in more than 500 years after repeated failed searches. But if this creature is still out there, we simply cannot let this happen. This species of colobus monkey has a unique red coat and a native range stretching through most of southwest Ghana. Hunting and habitat loss drove their population down to be reduced by up to 80% in the 1970s, and since 1978, not a single individual has been observed in the wild. Sadly, this monkey was frequently and illegally poached for bushmeat with little interference by local governments. Poaching is still a prevalent problem today, and those possible remaining individuals face a struggle from staying hidden from humans, which really sucks because human beings, especially starving ones looking for bushmeat, are really good at finding animals and killing them. But it's not just hunting that's a problem. Habitat destruction has also played a major role in its decline. The Miss Waldron's red colobus is the first primate to be suspected extinct in the 21st century, but there is considerable debate over whether this assessment is indeed correct. And that's why I think it is so important to, at the very least, give an attempt to figure out whether or not this animal is still out there. And there's even a little bit of hope. Although there have not been any confirmed sightings in over 25 years, in 2008, calls of the Miss Waldron's colobus monkey were heard by a team of scientists from the Swiss Center for Scientific Research in the Ehi forest. Along with hearing the calls, a fresh skin from a red colobus was rediscovered from a poacher, along with a tail in 2019. These are very clear indications that at least up until 2019, there were living individuals hanging out in the Ivory Coast. A single skin found in the possession of a hunter near the Ehi Lagoon in southeastern Ivory Coast in early 2002 raised even more hopes that at least one population of Miss Waldron's red colobus still hangs on. But subsequent field work in this region, including several forest reserves and nearby Île-Étoile National Park, has yielded no evidence of living individuals. The problem with surveying for primates is their extreme intelligence and arboreal nature, making it so difficult to tell whether or not those animals could still be there. My method for finding them would be to use acoustic audio traps set high in the trees and AI deciphering codes, which can then take those audio recordings, run them through a program, and give you 100% whether or not they're actually picking up Miss Waldron's. Following confirmations of the sounds and knowing the general areas, Baits and camera traps would then need to be set out in the treetops to see whether or not these monkeys could be moving through, and if rediscovered, putting in severe anti-poaching protocols, which of course all takes massive amounts of resources that likely the Ivory Coast doesn't have. So it's not the best situation, and given that even the most recent confirmations were over 20 years ago, and the population and bushmeat hunting in Western Africa has only gotten worse, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm sadly going to give this about a 6 out of 10 of being rediscovered. Whew, man, it's tough to remember all this. I'm glad I have this magic mind. Helps me stay pretty sharp. Oh, and it tastes good. Next up, a lost catfish so oily that you can use it as a torch. The fat catfish, last seen in 1957 in Colombia, has been lost for 66 years.
Yet hope remains that it could still be out there.
What's so unbelievably cool and unique about this fish is that it possesses extensive rings of fatty adipose tissue surrounding its body, making it the only freshwater catfish in the world with these features. Well, why is that interesting? In fact, this oily tissue makes it so greasy and fatty that it's sometimes referred to as the grease fish, and locals from the area used to impale it on a stick and set it alight and use it as a torch because it had so much fat and oil in its flesh. That's absolutely insane for a tiny little catfish. The fat catfish is only known from 10 specimens and was last seen in 1957. Researchers know next to nothing about the size, the biology, the feeding habits, or the growth of this unique species. So why did it disappear? Well, one possibility for the disappearance of the fat catfish is trout farming on the lake. In 1936, 100,000 rainbow trout eggs imported from North America were released into the lake. Cecil Miles, the man who first described the species, claimed this would cause the extinction of the catfish. He literally predicted the extinction of the catfish, and still they went ahead with it. Trout farming was originally an economic project promoted by the liberal government in Colombia during the 1930s. And, in fairness, it's still a source of income for many local families. The problem is, trout are voracious predators of smaller fish, which ultimately proved problematic for our fat catfish. So given that there are now trout in this lake and trout are voracious predators, why is it that I think that the fat catfish could still be out there? Well, even though trout were introduced to Lake Toda, they haven't completely overrun the lake like we see with other invasive species. In fact, researchers typically only see trout in particular areas, which has also made it less clear if trout actually had anything to do with the disappearance of the catfish in the first place. Now, thanks to trout's ecology, we know that trout don't live in super deep water, but catfish often do. Ichthyologists even think that the fat catfish may live in the deepest part of the lakes, meaning it's possible that the two species could actually coexist in the lake. In addition to this, a social research team learned from Lake Toda locals that the fat catfish was never common to begin with. I believe it's entirely possible that this lost species could be hiding out in the deepest, darkest pockets of this massive lake, just awaiting its rediscovery, which would have to be done with very crafty, new technology deep water fish traps, which are out there. We just have to figure out what can we use to bait in these fat catfish that isn't going to attract anything else. Well, luckily, we have research teams in Colombia that feel the same. And fingers crossed, it will be soon that we celebrate the rediscovery of the fat catfish. So given that there are already attempts in place, and given that a handful of ichthyologists and myself all believe that the fat catfish could be hanging on in the deepest parts of this high-altitude Colombian lake, I'm going to give this one a 7 out of 10 of the likelihood of still being out there. Next up, we've lost one of the world's only flying mammals, but maybe, just maybe,
At the center of our Milky Way galaxy, hidden behind clouds of dust and stars, lies something we cannot see with our eyes, but which has the mass of millions of suns. This mysterious object is called Sagittarius A star, and it's a supermassive black hole. Unlike the monsters powering distant quasars and active galaxies, Sagittarius A star barely makes a peep, but its silence is misleading. Just beneath the surface, there's a storm of magnetic fields, flares, and extreme gravity that stretches the limits of physics. This is the story of how we discovered it, how we photographed the unseeable, and what this black hole has taught us about the universe. The galactic bulge that hid the truth. For a long time, even after people began building telescopes and studying the stars with scientific tools, the center of the Milky Way remained hidden. Astronomers could map parts of the sky, track planets, and chart the motion of stars, but something was still in the way. Whenever they turned their instruments toward the thickest part of the Milky Way, toward the constellation Sagittarius, they ran into a wall of light and shadow, of gas and dust, and of stars packed so tightly that they blurred into each other. This area, now known as the galactic bulge, is one of the most crowded regions in the entire Milky Way. It is a huge central swelling made of hundreds of billions of stars. From Earth, it lies in the direction of the galactic center, but seeing through it is not easy. In fact, for centuries, it was nearly impossible. When people look up at the Milky Way with the naked eye, they see a pale band stretching across the night. It looks almost like a faint cloud, but that band isn't made of cloud or mist. It's made of stars. So many stars packed so close together that they blend into a soft glow. That glow gets brightest near the center of the Milky Way. But along with the brightness comes something else. Darkness. This darkness is not the absence of stars, it's the presence of dust. All across the galaxy, floating between stars, are clouds of interstellar dust. These clouds are made of tiny particles, bits of carbon ice and rock, left over from older stars and drifting slowly through space. While these particles are small, they're spread out over such huge distances that they can block light, especially visible light, the kind our eyes and early telescopes can see. That's the key problem. For most of history, telescopes worked only in visible light. They were built like giant eyes, collecting light from stars and focusing it into images. But visible light is easily blocked. When it tries to pass through dust, it gets scattered or absorbed, and nowhere in the